This is Uncommonly Remarkable, where we discuss the surprising everyday lives and notable accomplishments of community leaders, entrepreneurs, and everyday folks like you and me. My name is Artis Beatty. I am a doctor of optometry and the chief medical officer for My Eye Doctor OD. Though we will inevitably touch on topics within my area of expertise, the opinions and the conversations held here are separate from my work with My Eye Doctor. The founder of MyoMinds and a PhD candidate, today's guest describes himself as inquisitive, open, obsessive, and empathic. As a PhD candidate, George is investigating eating, exercise, and body image psychopathology in men and how to improve men's access to care for those concerns. He provides consultation work and/or training for healthcare services and charities, schools, universities, and other research institutes. He's become a leading authority in body image psychopathology and consulted on the new Netflix series Everything Now, has appeared on ABC News, has been in men's health in the US and UK, and has been an expert participant in multiple panels and discussions on the subject matter. He started MyoMinds, a mental health organization that focuses on research and raising awareness of the mental health concerns of anyone who exercises, including eating disorders, body or muscle dysmorphia, exercise addiction, and subclinical experiences. Expect to learn about George's personal journey and struggles with some of these issues and how he's used his experiences to focus his research and forward his recovery. Hear about prioritizing your true drivers and values in life, how to build a life pyramid in lieu of a pillar, how self-perception can be influenced by industry, social media, and even seemingly harmless compliments and comments in day-to-day conversation, and much, much more. I learned a ton about myself and how to engage some of my own challenges in this episode while having a bit of fun learning about George and some of his fun anecdotes along the way. Ladies, gentlemen, all you remarkable people, please help me welcome George Mycock to the show. Well, hello, George. It's so nice to have you on the show today. Thank you for taking the time.
Thanks, Artis. It's been, looking forward to it.
It's great when I get to talk to someone who is international because I love times and the differences between the times. And so full disclosure, it's bright and early morning here on the East Coast in the US, but it's early mid-afternoon for you.
Yeah, 2:30 over here. It's not really sunny in the UK ever at the moment, so it's hard to kind of tell. It's all kind of dim and grey.
That's fair. I've been fortunate enough to have several trips to the UK. I know you lived in London at one point. London is one of my favorite places, and so we actually went to London. We took the train all over. We went to York. We went to Brighton. So it's just that area of the world is just beautiful to me. But I really, really love London. So a little jealous you got to live there.
Yeah, it's funny when I was living there because I'm not a city person at all. I lived there because I was working there at the time for a year, and I always kind of tried to have those moments of gratitude. I used to walk across Tower Bridge, which is like one of the most famous bridges in the world, probably.
Yeah.
And I used to walk across it every single day to work and back from work because I lived quite close to the office. And I used to always, for the first couple of months, I just kind of did it and didn't really think about it. And then I started taking my headphones out and trying to be present in the moment because, like you say, so many people from all around the world come to London, and London's considered this, amazing city. But when you live there and you've lived in the UK and it's always just been kind of close by, it loses the specialty. It doesn't feel quite as amazing and interesting. Whereas the cities in the US for me seem amazing and really interesting, whereas maybe they're less so for you. And so yeah, it's nice to hear that, and it's a nice memory of I should be grateful that I got that year there, and I am grateful.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think you're right. I think you often take for granted where you are. And it's often you look back and say, man, that was a great section or part of my life. And I really should have taken more advantage of it. So I've learned over time to try to look for those moments wherever I am and try to pull in those advantages because you're right. Like I'm in New York at least once every 3 months or so. So I'm going to this city that is heard about around the world on a fairly frequent basis. I'm in DC at least once a month. And I don't always sit back and think, man, look at me. I'm driving past the Washington Monument, And so I've tried to do a little better about that.
Yeah, I think that's kind of practice for life, isn't it? Is trying to recognize that whole stay in the present, recognize what you've got. Even just now, I live in this beautiful countryside town in the UK now, and just trying to be like, there are going to be moments in my life where I don't get to see this view every day and don't get to see the trees outside my window and stuff like when I was in London. So yeah, it's good to think of those things.
I happened to run across you during there was an ABC news special, and there was a segment on body dysmorphia specifically and muscle dysmorphia. And you were one of the interviewees. And during the segment, there was just you had a really interesting story for me, really, because you had dealt with the disorder personally, but then from that, you had started doing other things, including founding MyoMinds. And so, the internet is a crazy place because, it took some doing to kind of figure out where to go. And but I sent you a message and you responded and said, absolutely, I'll come on the show. And I thought, wow, that was pretty quick for him to actually answer a message and get back to me. So again, thank you for taking this time.
Yeah, well, thanks for inviting me. I love doing these podcasts, and I have my own podcast, but I enjoy doing that, but I hate all the work that goes. There's so much commitment to this, and I have so many questions that I'll probably ask you after we finish recording. But I'm always interested when I meet fellow podcast people. I know how much work goes into this behind the scenes, and yeah, I love coming on. I love experiencing it, and it's really nice to be asked questions by different people from different perspectives and different backgrounds, because you'll ask stuff and we'll have a conversation where I'll probably discover stuff about the way I think and feel in this conversation that I may not have before, and maybe you will as well. And that's fun. I find that really fun. So always up for it.
That is fun. Let's figure out where the best place to begin really is. So if we were to talk about MyoMinds, I think that's maybe a great place to start, and we will go maybe backwards and forwards from there. Tell me a little bit about MyoMinds in general, and a little bit about kind of the vision or the mission behind it.
Yeah, so MyoMinds I started 5 or 6 years ago, I think, off the top of my head. And I call it a mental health organization. It's just me, but it's kind of a branded name so I can hide in the background for certain things that, I can kind of be involved, but not. My personal social medias are all private and all those kind of things, because I just want to be out of that. But the initial reason I started MyoMinds was it was an Instagram account where people could share their mental health stories surrounding exercise and surrounding sport, physical activity. So from my own lived experience, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a bit, I was very athletic and fit, and I was always exercising. I watched what I ate and ate very healthily, and had the kind of body, the physique that people would often orientate with being very healthy and physically fit. But I was still really struggling, and we hear so many conversations about how exercise is really great for you, and it is for so many people and in so many ways, in fact, for everyone to some degree. But for me, it was a real vice, and it became maladaptive and became problematic for me. And I so very rarely heard those nuanced stories in the fitness and sports space of, I'm doing all the things that are supposed to help me feel better and live my best life and be the best me and all these kind of things, but I still felt terrible and still was struggling in so many ways. And so I started MyoMinds as a place where people could share the nuances, not just the bad, I don't want to demonize it, but add that kind of shape to it. And then it's moved on from there now, where I have the podcast, and we're part of various research groups across the UK, and we've done some various bits across the kind of globe as well. And we develop training, do research studies, and do kind of media stuff and raising awareness.
It's an interesting point that you bring up with exercise and fitness in general. I think for a lot of people, it is kind of the relax and release, and a lot of people, if not most people, start the fitness journey because they are looking to feel better. And sometimes maybe people don't, it's not just the physical feel better, but it's the mental feel better. It's the feel better about yourself type of journey. But to your point, it can also go badly. And so How did you start to think about this? I'm not feeling better, and maybe this isn't normal for me.
I think I experienced it much sooner, but my point of realization, I think what we see often in the literature for a lot of mental health things, especially in men, is that it takes a real extreme experience to recognize that something is a problem. I was doing all the exercise and I was kind of eating in certain ways, which I can get into, and I was feeling terrible. I was going through these cycles of exercising an extreme amount, multiple times a day at points, and I was incredibly restrictive with what I ate and how I ate and everything around that. And when I was doing those things, I felt a sense of accomplishment. I felt like I was what I was supposed to be striving towards. But I always felt like I needed to keep doing more. And it kind of got to the point where I was doing such extreme practices, like I said, exercising so much and dieting, that I couldn't physically continue. I was exhausted all the time. And I had other responsibilities and I was at university and, family stuff comes up, you get ill, etc. So inevitably I was going to miss a session or I was going to go off my nutrition plan, whatever it was. And I had tied so much of my self-worth and self-identity into being that person who did those things because that was all that I felt like I had. That was all I felt that I was worth. It's all that I let myself have because I felt that anything else would distract me from it. That whenever I did miss a session or whatever, I would spiral into these kind of deep, dark depression, anxiety states, and eventually turned suicidal and kind of having suicidal thoughts and then later behaviors. And it got to the point where it was a day where I was planning on taking my own life. And I was very fortunate that a friend of mine turned up at my door and we had a conversation, and I kind of broke down in front of her and ended up seeking help from there, and things started moving forwards. So it took that moment for me to really tie in that it was that aspect of exercise and nutrition that was making me feel that way. I was experiencing it for so long, but it took that big moment of, oh no, this is not helping me. This is actually a problem, and that was really scary as well because it was, like I said, all you ever see online is how great it is for you, and I was doing all the things everyone said would make me feel healthier and better, and suddenly I realized that might have been, what am I supposed to do? The answer to it for most people is go and do the exercise, but that was what was the problem for me. So I felt quite lost.
And so I think I heard in one of your podcast, or you're a guest on a podcast, and you were talking a little bit about maybe your childhood and how some of these things may have started developing that. So maybe we should go backwards a little bit and let's talk a little bit about, I know you had an injury and from rugby, if I'm remembering correctly. Yep. So can you talk a little bit about some of that for us?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess to introduce it, where I think a lot of this spans from for me, and we see it in some of the kind of academic research around people experiencing similar stuff to me. When I was a kid, I always felt like I wasn't what I was supposed to be, or that I wasn't good enough in whatever sense. And so much of that for me accumulated around this sense of masculinity and being masculine, needing to be masculine. And the kind of older adult man in my life was my dad. And so I looked up to him, and my dad is always, we always, like where I come from, we describe it as hard as nails. So he's like, really tough, macho. He works really hard. He used to play rugby. He was really good at it. He's got scars on his face from where his face would split open every game, and he'd tell me they just put some Vaseline on it and he'd carry on. And, it was just, he's that kind of guy and always has been. And I've never been that. I've never been that macho or brave, or I'd never liked fighting or any of that kind of stuff. And I felt a lot of shame about that. I felt like I wasn't what I was supposed to be. And rugby was, it seemed, the saving grace for me, this sport that I could take part in and immediately gain that kind of capital, those kind of man points, so to speak, of, oh, well, if I'm doing this and I'm behaving in this way and I'm around these people and I tell people I'm playing rugby, I'm a rugby player, then I can kind of put up this guise of being what I'm supposed to be, and people won't see who I really am. And then, when I was 13, I had a spine injury. I broke one of the vertebrae in my spine, basically just snapped on me. Not
At
ideal.
13.
Yeah, 13 years old. And I had to, I couldn't, my doctor told me I couldn't play rugby anymore. They initially thought because I was young enough that the way that my spine had broken, it hadn't slipped, like kind of out of place. It had just cracked all the way across, like kind of broken all the way across. So they thought it might fix itself. So they waited for kind of 9 months or something it was, to see if it would fix itself, giving me kind of steroid injections and these kind of things to see if it would do something. And it didn't. So then I had to have surgery, and I've got kind of metal holding my spine together now. And they, and then I got to recover from that surgery. But so all in all, I was out for about a year, and I fully just laid on the floor. Because I couldn't lie in my bed because it was too soft and it would hurt my back, the curve. And I gained a lot of weight during my time off, and I was already very insecure, and I couldn't play rugby anymore. And when I got back to school, people were treating me very differently. Not really. I don't think I was being bullied, but people weren't treating me the same way. Before I think partially it was just because they felt a bit awkward because they hadn't seen me for a year, and I looked very different when I came back. But also there was the idea of I was very different to, everything I spoke about or did was around rugby, and suddenly I didn't have that. So I attributed all of it to this idea that I'd lost this masculinity and that my body was a display of that because I'd put on all this weight. People saw me as worse and whatever.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So I started to try and lose weight to try and fix that. And anyone who's lived in an overweight or obese body will know that if you lose weight, nobody gives a crap how you're doing it. They just think it's the best thing in the world, and all you get is praise and applause, and everyone loves it. So I started losing weight faster. I started eating less, exercising more, doing it more and more and more. And at one point, being somebody who kind of is a researcher in this area now, I was meeting the kind of clinical criteria for anorexia. It would have been atypical anorexia because I never got to a low enough BMI, I don't think. But I was behaving in that manner, and then I started getting into, as a young boy who was getting into fitness, for all the wrong reasons, but doing it. So I started looking online at the fitness industry and these kind of influencers and different people, and found every man in that space had six-pack, big arms, big shoulders, etc. So I was like, oh, that's what I need to do. That's what I need to look like if I want to be masculine. And all of the way that they spoke, the way that they explained this stuff, it all gave me very similar tones to what I felt like I was getting from rugby. Of, are you man enough to do this workout? Only real men can look like this and train this hard, and all these words and phrases that just spoke to what I felt like I was lacking. So I latched onto that and started lifting weights and started trying to eat more, but then also I was afraid that would make me gain body fat, so I ate more, and then I would make myself sick to in this like obviously it doesn't work that way, but in my mind I was like, maybe I can, if I eat more protein and make myself sick, I'll still build muscle but won't gain body fat, and just developed all these kind of disordered habits around these new ways of eating and exercising.
You bring up two things that I think are really important and really something to talk about a little bit farther. I think thinking about children and early life, and the point you make around you lost weight as a child, and people reinforce the fact that you were losing weight, not necessarily the how you were losing weight piece. I think that is something that people aren't really aware that it's happening, but I think that happens quite often, quite frequently.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's this thing of I understand it, and I don't want to demonize people for feeling this way, but I think it's very easy to assume that a comment that you are saying through positivity, you're praising someone, you think that must then have a positive influence. And so I understand it, that idea of I'm praising them, therefore this must be a nice thing for them. But it's understanding what that means to that person. What is it behaviors are you praising them doing? Because I was basically starving myself and exercising whilst feeling lightheaded and all this kind of stuff. And then every time someone met me, they were praising the outcome of those behaviors. Yeah. So I was like, oh, I need to keep doing this in order to keep getting this praise. And so it's just, it's yeah, like you say, it's being aware of that. And it's a tough one to kind of move around. I think my general kind of fall on for this, or what I say to people is, I think if possible, just don't comment on bodies. I think like you can comment, but you can comment on what it means. If you think that someone's like being dedicated to something, or they seem like they have more energy, or they seem more happy, just talk about that. You know, if that's what it is. If they still look sad, if they look sad and unenergized and whatever, why are you complimenting them in the first place? So there must be something that you're saying the body is equating to in them.
That's an excellent point, because I think, you know, in general, it's easier for us, particularly when you're meeting someone or you've not seen someone for a very long time. The physical attributes are the first things that you see. And so it's ingrained for us to make some comment or some compliment about what's changed over that time span, or how we perceive that person to physically look. But we don't always think about, are there other things that we could start the conversation with, or compliment the person on, or ask the person about in those conversations? And so I think that's a really, really strong point.
Yeah, and I understand. I can almost feel the kind of hesitancy of people of like, oh, I'm not supposed to tell my friend that they're like looking great or whatever. And I get that. I think it's just, you can stall that comment for a little while and just ask them what they're up to these days, and ask them what they're getting on. And then if they say, oh, I've been doing this new fitness routine, or I've started, you know, doing something, you can go, oh, how's that going? I did notice that you're looking different. Or you know, so you can still say it and still maybe get onto that if you're you know, for whatever reason you're desperate to say that. But you can just wait a little bit just to see how that person feels about it. The weight loss can mean so many things. It can mean illness. Like, what if that person's been ill for the last 6 months? You know, there's all sorts of factors that can come in that I think stalling it for a second can be helpful.
And the other point you made was around the fitness industry and influencers. I would throw in even movies and television as an example, the Marvel universe and the superhero look. Those things are very influential in the way people think and see themselves. And it's really, for me, there was some special that I was reading and looking at the difference between, say, G.I. Joe figures today and G.I. Joe figures when G.I. Joe was invented. And there have been a lot of changes in the way those figures represent how men are structured. And I think it goes to your point in that if you're spending time in the social media, or you're spending time trying to figure out where you fit in comparison to the things that are advertised, it can become very difficult for you.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's funny, the study that you're quoting there, talking about G.I. Joe figures, it'll be from Harrison Pope and colleagues, and I have his book on my desk right now. I was just going to grab it, but it's underneath some other books, so I didn't want them all to fall over. But yeah, there's a classic example of, you mentioned Marvel movies. The one I always think of is one of the new Spider-Man films has I forget the actor's name, the English guy who plays Spider-Man nowadays.
Tom Holland.
Tom Holland, that's it, thank you. There's a scene with him, I remember watching it in the cinema, where he's speaking to his aunt, Aunt May, and she like opens the bedroom door and he's just shirtless, and he just stands there and he's just kind of like speaking, but he's like flexing his abs, you can see, and he's just like, yeah, like you're just speaking to, like, just put a shirt on, like you wouldn't just stand there like that in that conversation. But and he's supposed to be, you know, he's supposed to be a teenage boy in this thing.
Right.
It's just weird. Like, well, there's no reason for Spider-Man to be there. But it is that idea of, you know, there's a sense of buy-in from people of, oh, if they, you know, aesthetics is so important to our society, and especially because of social media, that kind of classic thing we all bring up every time we talk about mental health, that I think media companies rely on that idea and maybe consciously or subconsciously showing a physique that is kind of impossible to obtain. And that is the case, because even the actors say, well, yeah, I look like that for a
That's
day,
right.
but then I feel like crap for a month.
Right.
It's there's a sense of buy-in potentially of maybe the idea of, oh, if a superhero has to look superhuman in order for me to feel this is realistic, or I don't know what it is, but yeah, there must be some reason they're leaning on it.
And then when you think about your personal journey, and I'm trying to kind of figure out where you decided that you were going to devote a lot of your life and research now to better understanding some of the mental health issues. Where did you start? I know that you have you have a degree in sport, exercise, and physical activity. Like how did all of those things come about as you start to move towards making decisions around your research?
It's a great question. The peak of my kind of concerns around muscularity and these behaviors was during my undergraduate. So I was doing sport, exercise, physical activity at Durham University. And I got into that mostly because of my disordered eating. And so I was so obsessed with exercise and nutrition. It made so much sense to go to uni and study exercise and nutrition. And so it was around the second year of uni where I kind of had that moment that I mentioned before, where I was suicidal and started seeking help.
I see.
And I was still kind of working on it for a while. And, therapy takes a while, but I was seeing a counselor every week. And it was the third year of uni, so about a year later, that I set up MyoMinds as this place where people could share their stories.
Oh, okay.
And then I kind of began that right at the end of my third year. Then I started my master's in exercise nutrition. Still kind of with this kind of concerns around nutrition. And it was about halfway through that nutrition degree that MyoMinds and my kind of knowledge about this stuff started to get recognized, and I started to get asked to come and do podcasts, and I was asked to be a part of some research groups. And the area of research that I'm interested in, this kind of muscularity oriented disordered eating, body image concerns, etc., is very small, but was even smaller a few years ago. So I was one of very few people who were interested in this small section of literature. So I kind of got a name for myself quite quickly, having read the papers and spoke about it, that it kind of escalated quite quickly. And yet about halfway through my nutrition degree, I decided I wasn't interested in nutrition anymore. I was working as a nutritionist and a strength and conditioning coach at the time, kind of like doing freelance stuff with people. And I felt like the practices I was doing were feeding into this to some degree. So I started to try and make a switch in the way that I was teaching nutrition and exercise. And, I became this really annoying student in my master's degree program where every lecturer I would say, yeah, but what would you do if the athlete has an eating disorder? And then they'd be like, what? But with that was amazing to me, was that, there's not too much literature that's very good on this, but there is a paper from probably about 20 years ago now that's really high quality. And they found that, so when we look at eating disorders, prevalence wise, the assessment tools we use are pretty bad on men. So men tend to score lower, but also maybe men get them lower, we're not sure, in general community. And it's quite considerably higher. So it's something like 1 in 4 people with eating disorders are male assigned at birth, and the other 3 are female assigned at birth. But when we look at athletes in particular, male athletes it's even more likely for them to have an eating disorder than females in kind of general community. So the increase in likelihood of having an eating disorder in the athlete population is monumental. It's massive. There's a huge boost in the likelihood of someone experiencing it if they're an athlete. And I was doing a nutrition degree, a master's in nutrition at the, I think it still is ranked the world #1 sports nutrition university in the world. I said world twice there. But they didn't mention eating disorders once, or disordered eating, or what to do, or how to spot it, or consider it. And that was so baffling to me. And I think that was one of the reasons why I decided to dedicate my life to it, was because one, because of my own experiences and the importance I feel from that, but also the lack of awareness around it in the kind of field.
There's a lot in there to think of.
Yeah, I tend to
about,
word
right?
vomit.
Well, no, this is good. So first, maybe we should talk a little bit about body dysmorphia and muscle dysmorphia for folks who don't have a good understanding of the subject matter. And then we'll talk a little bit about the men versus women, because I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, so I as we go through this, you'll notice I use several different terms, and I'll try and keep this concise, but I often use muscularity-orientated issues or concerns or something like that to encompass what I'm talking about.
Okay.
And when I use that term, I'm encompassing kind of muscle dysmorphia, but also eating disorders and those kind of concerns when related towards muscularity. So body dysmorphic disorder is a clinical condition, a mental health disorder that's characterized by some kind of severe level of dysfunction in your life or severe negative effect on your life based on a kind of obsessive idea that there is something wrong with the way that you look that appears slight or non-existent at all to other people. So it can be about anything. It can be about your skin, the size of your nose, the length of your arms, or, anything. It can be literally anything. And when a person meets all the criteria for that, but also the thing that they're most kind of worried about or most concerned about is muscularity, then they specify it as muscle dysmorphia. So it's called a specifier in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. And the reason I bring in eating disorders quite often is because in the eating disorder criteria, there is currently no mention of muscularity, or it isn't mentioned at all. The criteria is quite open, so you could technically fit in if you were oriented towards muscularity, but there's no specifier like muscle dysmorphia. And many of the people who meet muscle dysmorphia criteria also have kind of overlap into eating disorders, usually quite significantly. And there's quite a lot of concern in the kind of research and kind of clinical space and arguments back and forth of whether it should be a form of body dysmorphic disorder or if it should be an eating disorder. I personally think both exist. I think I think muscle dysmorphia should stay, but we should maybe bring in an eating disorder as well. But yeah, that's where all the terms are coming from, and that's why I'm kind of spanning across.
And then within muscularity, I think I've heard you in previous conversations talk about it being a mixture of size and or leanness, and that those two play together, which is why the term muscularity is a little bit better to use to describe.
Yeah, exactly. I think whenever you talk about muscle, we like to think in extremes as just human beings in general. But so when people mention muscle dysmorphia, I think everyone assumes those like super huge steroid taking people in the gym with tattoos all over their face and, like screaming at each other, which it definitely can be the case. But it isn't only that, is the kind of point there. It can also be about leanness. So trying to become as lean and like remove as much body fat as possible in order to show your muscularity more. So you might not actually be that big, but you're really obsessed with being super vascular and like super lean. That can also be muscle dysmorphia.
Fair. And in the research, you just mentioned 1 in 4 with diagnosis is male, outside of athletes, right?
Yeah.
Is that based on actual occurrence, or is that based on the fact that that men are less likely to participate, identify, or be diagnosed?
Yeah, so it's difficult to say. So the basic kind of history, very, very in a quick sense, the research on eating disorders has almost entirely been on women. From the start of it to the end. The very first case study of anorexia back in like the 1600s was a male patient, but since then almost all the research has been done on women or females, and to the point where prior to 2016, less than 1% of research looking at anorexia specifically included male participants. So our level of understanding of men is so small, like so small.
Yeah.
So the problem is that means that our entire kind of conceptualization of eating disorders, and our whole kind of evidence-based understanding is based on women's experiences and observations of women. So that means that the evidence-based diagnostic criteria, the evidence-based assessment tools are all designed on this perspective. And that means that most of the assessment tools that we use don't work as well on men. So even when we test males who are in hospital with anorexia or whatever it is, they still score lower than females who are in hospital. So even when they're at that extreme level, they're still reporting less than the female. So it's either that every male in hospital is not that bad, and for some reason they've got it anyway, or the more likely thing is they're just as bad as the females who are in there, but the score just doesn't show it. So there's no kind of data to back this up yet because the assessment tools are so bad, but my gut based off of those, what we've seen in the measures and the way that they're tested, it's currently estimated that it's 1 in 4, but I think it's probably more. There's probably just a lot of kind of men's conditions or men's concerns that aren't being acknowledged by these assessment tools. And then it's even worse in clinical settings because men don't tend to seek help. And there's this kind of general societal assumption, I think, that eating disorders are a woman's issue or something that mostly women get. So we see in the literature that a lot of men will say that they delayed seeking help because they didn't think that they could be an eating disorder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when we think about men seeking help or just men in general, I think I kind of chuckled at the guys in the gym. Tattoos on their face, yelling at each other.
Yeah,
but that is not a unrealistic scenario in people's minds about maybe people who are using steroids as an example. And it's really interesting for me to think about how in society people who have, say, a drug addiction, we have some form of sympathy and some form of empathy for, right? And we want to go out and help them with illicit drug addiction. But you could argue that people who are abusing steroids may actually be in a similar type of situation, but there generally is not any empathy or sympathy for those folks, at least not to the same level.
Yeah, I completely agree. I've spoken about this on podcasts in the past. It's hard to kind of know exactly why. I don't think there's any literature on this, but my understanding or my thought on this is that I think a lot of it is based on the idea that it's commonly assumed to be an appearance-based drug. So you're taking steroids because you want to look a certain way, and then there's the assumption of you're just very vain or you're just full of yourself. You just want to look at yourself in the mirror, and therefore that's less of a negative impact than someone who's addicted to a drug where they're trying to escape something or whatever it is.
I see. Yeah.
So I think a lot of the time it's people. I think it's also very commonly associated with cheating because of sport. So there's this idea of you're narcissistic, you're vain, and you're a cheater trying to get the easy route. And I think there's a kind of that undertone. I think this sets a kind of precedent of it's hard to be empathetic for those people because why would we be when there's people who are really struggling and they're taking this, why would we give money to help these narcissistic arseholes or, which, as someone who struggled with it, I never took steroids myself, but I was very fortunate that I came across a gym partner in my kind of, as I was kind of getting into this area, who had taken lots of steroids and told me all of his horror stories. So I was kind of scared off them. But I was very close. I was the prime candidate to take them. So as someone who was there, I was that narcissistic person that you would consider being vain, et cetera, et cetera. I understand that it would have been hard to be empathetic to me because I made every conversation about the gym, and I was constantly flexing in the mirror and constantly doing press ups in the in the office when I was at work and stuff. But and I'm sure to other people it looked like I was so full of myself, but it was built on this idea that I'm not enough. I need to check in the mirror in case I don't look good enough anymore, and therefore people aren't going to like me. I need to do these press ups because if I lose muscle, I'm going to lose who I am. But to other people, it was, oh, this guy's checking himself in the mirror again. Oh, he's doing press ups again. Like I can see how hard it would be to be empathetic towards me.
Yeah, that not enough piece. It affects people in a lot of different ways. And it's and when you say it in the sense or thinking about eating disorders or dysmorphia, it starts to really make sense that could be something underlying. I don't know that people actually do think about it that way, and I'm pretty sure though that people don't think about it from the side of a person who's using steroids as an example, as they don't feel like they are enough. This must be pushing them, and so I think it's a really fair statement and something important to consider.
I'm glad you agree, and it's something just. I think even just in myself, I can get it. When as someone who researches this, if I'm in the gym and I see a bunch of guys screaming at each other and, be it like kind of flexing in the mirror, taking their shirt off to check, whatever, that my gut reaction is, oh, what a word I'm not going to say, but then I'm like, oh, that was me. And I felt terrible. I was doing that because I felt like I needed to, and I had a smile on my face in the gym when I was doing it. And I was joking about it with my friends, like, oh, look at the gains or whatever. But it was built on a desperateness of, I hope they agree. And I hope other people see this and think that I'm a good person as well.
So now that you have unprecedented awareness, right? And you've made you've had the personal struggle that has kind of pointed you in this direction. How do you go day to day and keep these things in check?
Yeah. So there's kind of several. It's about having tools in the toolbox. That's quite what I think often people say. It's about developing skills and having things in place that you can use to help with your mental health and to help with different things than I used to. So it used to be that I, struggle with mental health, and I think I will do for the rest of my life. I'll get these initial negative emotions. I feel I'm very neurotic in that if something bad happens in my life, I feel it very harsh. I feel it very hard, and I don't think I can change that necessarily. But what I've done is I've developed skills and tools in my toolbox for things to do to help me with that. So it used to be if I felt that way, I would look in the mirror, I would go and do a workout, I would skip a meal, or I would do something like that. Whereas now I will meditate, or I'll talk to somebody, or I'll write things down, or there's all sorts of different things that I can do. And also another kind of aspect and a big thing that I worked on with my counselor initially was this idea of, someone put it very nicely to me once in a podcast that I did, where she was talking about athletes who struggle with mental health. But I think it kind of spans to my experience as well, in that I built a pillar of my kind of self-worth, where the base of the pillar was my body and my exercise and my diet, and then every other aspect of myself was built on top of that. So when my body didn't look how I wanted it to, or my workout didn't go the way I planned, or I missed a certain thing in my diet that I felt like I needed to, the entire pillar would collapse. But instead what I did was I built a pyramid. So I started looking for other things in myself, and it took a long time because I'd built everything around my body, to find things that I love about myself and I like about myself that I can lean on when I feel a bit insecure about my body, or I don't do the work I planned on doing, or whatever it is. So now I recognize that I love that I'm smart and that I'm kind and that I am a good friend and I'm a good partner, and these kind of things that I can lean on those days where I'm like, oh, I don't like the way my body looked in that photo, or whatever it is. I can go, but in the grand scheme of things, I've also got lots of other great things about me, and maybe it's okay, and I can kind of lean on that, which is helpful.
I think that's really important, and something that I'm a big supporter of having counseling, having someone to talk to, getting proper advice, and I always encourage people who are having problems to think about how they want to go about getting help, which is by itself something that's very difficult for any number of people. But I do think being able to restructure the way you think about your circumstances helps you to get into a place that you're able to more properly deal with things as they go, awry as things tend to go, right? And so it's
Exactly.
just interesting for me to hear how you've structured things around that way.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think it's almost become a cliche of that you if you're struggling, talk to somebody. And I worry about that. The fact that it's almost it's like regurgitated online constantly over and over and over again. People always say it, that it loses meaning. So I always try and kind of come back to that and say that it's real. You know, what we're both saying here, it really does help. And if I think the reason a lot of people don't do it is because they feel like they're not ill enough, or they feel some kind of stigma or some kind of like they're going to be kind of laughed at or seen in a negative way for doing those things. For one, I would say everyone feels like they're not ill enough. So if you have that feeling, just disregard it entirely. And the stigma stuff, I always think, do you want to live your life governed by this arbitrary rule that is objectively making you feel worse?
Right.
You're feeling down and you're feeling sad. That's why you're considering getting help. And the thing that's stopping you is the idea that somebody else might laugh at you. Like, do you want to live by that person's rule? Or that person probably doesn't exist as well. Or if they do, you don't want to be friends with them anyway.
Yeah.
And so it's thinking to yourself, do I really want to live by that imaginary person's rules?
That's
idea
a powerful
is probably
thought. That is a very powerful thought. I do think that a lot of the things that we experience young in life really do influence the way we go about adulthood. And there are lots of positive things that we all experience that help us to become the people that we are. But those negative things also influence us as well.
Sure.
And, thinking about your growing up and your experience with rugby, the injury, and kind of that path towards what I'm going to call established masculinity is a very interesting concept. And I think we all go through some of those things fairly similarly. And it is a matter of when we get intervention from say other lanes of traffic that kind of direct where we're going to end up going. I think speaking of your childhood, by the way, you grew up at some point. You lived on a zoo. Is that right?
Yes, I did. I did not expect that to be the thing you were going to bring up. That's funny. Yes, I did. When I was a kid, my dad was the head zookeeper for a zoo in near Alton. Have you heard of Alton Towers before? People might have heard of Alton Towers. It's a theme park in the UK. It's a very big kind of theme park.
Oh,
in
yes,
the UK.
I have. Yes.
There was a zoo near there. I think it still is there. I think it's changed name and things since then. I think it's exchanged hands a few times, but my dad was the head zookeeper and my mum was kind of in charge of all the administration side. So we had a house kind of outside the zoo in like a local town. But the owner of the zoo also had a cottage that they didn't live in that was in the zoo, like actually on the zoo grounds.
How cool is that?
I would say, like 5 days a week, I slept in the zoo, and I would get driven to school. I'd get picked up by the zoo's van, and we'd go there. Some of my favorite memories as being a little kid was my school, because we were so close to the zoo. We'd occasionally, probably once a year or so, go on a school trip to my zoo. And I felt like the coolest kid ever because I knew everyone and knew all the animals' names, and it was cool.
Man, did you offer people behind the scenes tours? I would have. I would have charged admission and been like, "Hey, look, I got some behind the scenes action going over here."
I didn't do that, but I did. I have a funny story. They used to we used to have pelicans, like those big birds with the big bills. And they used to do a feeding show with the pelicans. So you'd go and you'd sit in this little thing and the zookeeper would jump over the fence and throw fish around. And sometimes when I was little, the zookeepers used to let me do the kind of speech with them. So I'd be in there throwing stuff and teach people about pelicans. And this one time we went on a school trip, and my teacher didn't realize that I lived there and done this for a long time. And during the show, I thought it'd be a funny idea for me to jump it and like join in. And my teacher had no idea, and just all she saw was just this one of the kids jumped over the fence, and she full on like screamed and panicked. It was so funny.
Oh my
I mean, I
gosh.
feel bad for her because that must have been terrifying, but it was a funny moment.
Yeah, as a kid, no warning, just jump over the fence. It feels like it's going to be a news special at the end, but I'm glad she survived and that you were fine.
Yeah.
And so you've also done, I think you've consulted on a couple of, was it a Netflix series? Was that right?
Yeah. Everything Now on Netflix. Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about that, because I think you mentioned earlier that you became kind of the authority and people were searching for you, but when it comes to, you've been on panels, you've been on Netflix, like if people are listening and they want to find you and get more information, where are some places that they would see your touch?
I suppose a lot of the stuff that I do is more like kind of academic-y side. So, I mean, if you can kind of like search my name in different academic spaces and you can find stuff. Regarding media things, like I said, there's the Netflix show called Everything Now, which follows a story of this girl, Mia, who was in, I won't give any spoilers, but she was in a eating disorder clinic for just over a year, I think. And she comes out and she feels like she's missed her kind of life, and therefore she decides to do everything now and kind of catch up on all the things that her friends have done while she was in the hospital. Okay. But it touches on kind of body dysmorphia and eating disorders and that kind of thing. And maybe slight spoiler alert, but I was involved. So there was someone there who had muscularity-oriented concerns, and I kind of consulted on how to best portray that. And it was really good fun.
Wow.
So you can go watch that. That was really cool. I don't know if you can get it in the US, but there's a documentary on Channel 4 here. I'm sure you can get it somewhere, called Obsessed with My Muscles, which is a documentary following one of the guys, a guy called Miles, who's on Made in Chelsea over here in the UK. It's a big kind of TV show. And it's a kind of, I was in that talking about my experience, but it's exploring muscle dysmorphia as well. What else is there? I was on video. There's another kind of mostly UK based kind of channel. It's an internet thing called Lad Bible. And they do these series called Round Table, where they get people to discuss their experience of different things. And they did one about body dysmorphic disorder, and I did that as well. So if you go on YouTube and type in Lad Bible body dysmorphic disorder or something, I'm sure it'll come up. But yeah, and there's other bits and bobs as well. I think if you just Google my name, I tend to come up. So feel free. I've got a very, let's say, unique surname. I'm sure it'll be written somewhere. So it's easy for me to stand out on the internet algorithms. So you just type in my name and you'll get it. You'll get all this kind of stuff, I'm sure.
Awesome. In some of your podcasts, you present the idea, you're talking through the idea, and then for a second or two, you try to think about the other side, right? But out of that, there's these questions that you tend to ask people towards the end, and I thought some of them were kind of neat.
Okay.
And so I'm going to ask you a little bit, just kind of because I've heard you talk about it. So the first thing is, I know that you like horror movies.
Yes.
But I also, in one of your podcasts, heard that you might like Lord of the Rings. Is that right?
Yeah, big fan.
Okay. So this is what we're going to do. You ask people about their favorite historical individual. So from the Lord of the Rings, who's your favorite character and why?
This might take me a second. I think it has to be. I keep kind of considering maybe it's others, but it has to come back to Samwise.
Okay. Yeah.
He is the most incredible human being. He does. There is no pressure, or nobody says, Sam, you have to take Frodo. Nobody's really pressuring him. Gandalf kind of leans on him and says to look after Frodo. Throughout the movie, there are so many times where Sam could turn away and leave and not have to deal with any of it. And no one would be that upset with him because he's going through hell. There's one point where, Gollum convinces Frodo that Sam ate all the bread and Frodo's going a bit crazy with the ring, and he tells him to go away and that he hates him and all this kind of stuff. And Sam still goes back and then carries Frodo up the mountain to throw the ring into the fire. Sam is an angel. He you know what? He doesn't get enough praise at the end either. He should have a statue built in his name, or you know what I mean? Like
I do.
He is the unsung hero, and I think in the I'm not a true Lord of the Rings fan because I haven't read the books, but I can never read fiction. I just can't get into it. But in the film, he doesn't get enough praise. I don't feel. Maybe he does in the books, but yeah, he needs more.
Yeah, that's fair. Of the characters that pop up and then the characters that stay in the movie, he's probably one of the ones that gets zero recognition. And so it's pretty awesome, and it's very telling that you would identify with Sam as being one of the better characters in the Lord of the Rings series. So that's really, really cool.
If you're listening to this and you were surprised that I said Sam, just go back and watch the Lord of the Rings now with this knowledge that Sam is the best character, and you'll understand immediately what I mean. He is incredible. He's such an amazing person.
You've done a lot, and you are in the midst of doing more. But I have to know what's next for you.
Oh, I mean, currently I am studying my PhD, so I'm coming up to the end of my second year, and I'm looking at my kind of general idea is looking at why it is we don't see as many men in kind of clinical settings for eating, exercise, and body image concerns. So that kind of feeds into a lot of stuff we've been talking about today. The kind of lack of recognition of muscularity, the fact that most of it's designed on men. But also I'm really interested in that help-seeking behavior and what is it that's stopping men from seeking help, and what is it that organizations aren't doing. So my PhD has been looking around that, and I'm continuing to do that. So my kind of main focus at the moment is very much on finishing the PhD and getting my doctorate and being finished with that. Then I really want to, I think once the PhD is done, I want to kind of put my gas on MyoMinds a bit more again. I've kind of had to come back a little bit because the PhD takes up so much time. But I want to start doing more kind of media stuff, and I'm really passionate about implementing into policy and protocol and trying to make changes. And that's one of the things I'm really trying to do with my PhD. But yeah, moving forwards, I'm hoping to have some impact on the world of eating disorders and the world of body dysmorphic disorder, and especially with men is kind of my area of passion, because they are a minority group in that specific area. That I am really kind of passionate about trying to change that and trying to help them.
And if there's any advice you could give a listener who may be wondering what they should do next, what would that advice be?
I think that I'll go back to what I said before in don't build a pillar, build a pyramid. Find multiple things about yourself that you can love. I think especially, like I said, my area of research and my experiences as a man, and I'm really interested in masculinity. And I think so much of the messaging of masculinity is so like univariate, like you're this one little tight thing, you're the protector and provider, and anything else is wrong and you should be embarrassed about. And that's so limiting. And if that means that if those things fall, if you lose your job or whatever happens, your entire sense of being can just collapse. I think build that pyramid, find those other things that you love about yourself and that you can be, that you can identify with and feel strong and confident in. It doesn't mean that you have to not be masculine. You can still identify with those masculine things, but find other areas where you can identify with that and build that pyramid. Because life's going to happen. You're going to get injured. You're going to lose your job. You're going to, X, Y, and Z is going to happen. So find those other aspects that you like about yourself, love about yourself.
I think that is amazing advice. And it's been fantastic to actually get and sit and talk with you. Feels like I almost have known you because I've now consumed a lot of George-related stuff, right? But to have an actual conversation where I get to ask you things and wait for you to respond has been great. So again, thank you for taking the time for us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. You're an amazing podcast host, and I really enjoyed speaking to you. So thanks.
Hopefully, we'll get to continue to stay in touch. I'll get to follow you through your PhD, finishing that out. And I can't wait to see some of the other amazing things that you do.
Thank you.
And so we end another episode. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us. I certainly appreciate all your support. So if you enjoyed the content, please like, subscribe, and share the podcast with your friends. The more you share, the more opportunities we will have to bring you great guests and their remarkable stories. And if you want to know more about the guests, get background information on previous episodes, or just learn a bit more about me and the show, visit us at uncommonlyremarkable.com. Feel free to leave me a comment or a suggestion, and if you want to be featured on the show, click the Contact Us button. Until next time, stay remarkable.
Podcast.